ask something?
Yes, please.
Thanks for all the explanation. I would ask something. For tomorrow's session, we're gonna give some interactivity and animation feature through this data visualization procedure. Yeah, I mean to use the Unity's features and to actually get benefits from there.
Yeah, today is mainly focusing on the low level and small block, just like, for example, understanding the Unity component, because I mean, individual people has a different sort of the level of the, the Unity scale. So I think it's necessary to gentle introduction for the Unity and component-centric programming. And also, the most importantly, we need to know how to import data and how to break down the data into small pieces to convert the information that Unity component can consume to visualize something on the screen. And mesh is also important. And inaction is also important piece for the interactive data visualization. So today's workshop is more about like a revisit, focus, and I mean, it's impossible to understand everything in one day, particularly a few hours. But the goal of this workshop for today is give like a minimum example with some comment that you guys can understand. And also we're gonna, at the end of this workshop, we're gonna publish this video on the YouTube so that you guys can access. And also if you guys have any question, please let me know. Yeah, and we can discuss it.
So what we were thinking.
And tomorrow, Yana, you can talk a little bit about the workshop that you prepare for tomorrow. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. So the idea for today is to just to make sure that everybody is comfortable with importing data, so from different sources. And tomorrow we're gonna look at how to import a component of a city, and then begin to plot data, and in this case, environmental data, and then try to represent it in augmented reality. Now, obviously, there's a lot of technical components to that kind of version of the device that you're using, etc. So we're gonna basically preparing in a way that we're covering all the basics. But one of the things that you're gonna come across, just importing data as CSV or JSON, they are pre-packages that you could use, but also it's really important to just understanding the core components of how to work with data. So what we were thinking for the rest of today, over the time that we have left, if you guys could just spend time exploring the examples and just take a look at what is the information, what are you trying to import, so then this way you can address any questions you might have.
Yeah, thank you. May I ask a question? Yeah, so basically you are input one moment of the real-time data. I want to know that if it's possible in Unity to input the real-time data. The real-time data always change over time. So is it possible? You muted.
And Jay, you're muted.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, absolutely possible. Yeah, why not? But okay, let me show you. Yeah, so actually, you know what? This example is doing, okay, not this one. The data section, yeah, REST API number 4. So you can play it, clear.
Yeah, we're going to talk about more of this tomorrow. Just
okay, I need to change the thing. This is very simple. I mean, we can keep recasting based on the time. Yeah, so here, can you see this? As time goes by, the number is increased, right? 5, 6, 7. I'm keep recasting and then receive the data and update the data. But the weather temperature data is not that changing like in a second, right? Maybe we can recast the data noon or night or morning 3 times a day, then we can compare and then make some interpolation between the data. So I think that this is actually the real-time data fetching the visualization. So let me quickly show you the code. It's nothing special, but keep in mind, for free user, I think it has a limitation for the data request, data query. But it depends on the how, I mean, depends on the organization, but whether open weather, I guess, yeah. In this case, they have their own some policy. So here, anyhow, this is the update, right? While I'm click the play and then the loop or the renderings keep happening behind the scene as a background, right? Then every 100 frame, meaning that like around 3 seconds, I recast and then update the data with the scale of the cylinder as a visualization. So it's just pretty easy, because the start point, I mean, the reason I put only this computation in the start is because the quality itself is pretty heavy, so that I don't want to update every state for every second. Yeah, because then otherwise I blocked from the API side. So yeah. So to answer your question, is yes. So we can put the request and updating sequences. We can put it inside of the update, which happening every loop. Yeah, we can do that. You know what I mean? You are mute.
Yeah, yes.
It's more about like, it's not Unity problem, it's more about like the server side, because request every time is pretty heavy. So you can make
them. So what we'll talk about this more tomorrow. Basically, weather stations are they're not updated you know, every second. So the lowest resolution you can find is every 2 minutes. And that's still, for instance, actually City of Seoul is one of the ones that does the most updating. So that's every 2 minutes. Often they do it either, you know, if you have sensors on the field, it's every 15 minutes or even once a day. So it's not a type of updating that you would see it all the time. But we'll talk about more the environmental data tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
So what we recommend is go through these examples. The county example is a really good one because you can add names, you can comment out names and just see like how the plotting is changing, and go through structure and just kind of understand how is it different when you're working with a CSV one versus JSON, when you're using more real time. So in this case, the REST API, API example. So then this way, you know, we'll be covering the basics, then we'll build on tomorrow.
And can we ask our question in Discord interface until tomorrow?
Yeah, certainly. You could certainly do that. We'll upload this video as soon as we're done. If you want to spend the rest of the time maybe in breakout rooms or on your own, that's completely fine. It's quite tricky, right? When you have a short workshop, you know, either we construct everything from scratch or give you everything, but so we're trying to kind of play a fine balance, but I think it's important for everybody to just look at the information and just ask questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So however you guys want to span your time, just let us know and then we can break accordingly. Maybe one question that would be helpful just to kind of get a sense of how you guys are thinking about this information. Do you have a project in mind that you would like to use this in? So that would help us in perhaps how we shift or form tomorrow's session. So I'm curious because you might all come from different maybe overview of this. So maybe it would help us if you have a specific target in mind, just to let us know. Yeah, go ahead. Anybody wants to?
May I say something?
Sure, please.
Data visualization by Raster. Sorry, my internet connection is unstable somehow.
Okay. Do you want to turn off your camera? It might help with the camera. Okay.
Okay, I would say I experienced this kind of data visualization, the OBJ5 or Excel data in Grasshopper.
Mm-hmm.
And what really allured me to join this workshop is the interactivity that the interfaces like Unity grants us. So the real-time interactions and using the real-time changing data is point of consideration for me. So I'm currently a first-year PhD student,
Mm-hmm.
and my proposal somehow is related to data mining, and I wanted to explore the options also for data visualizations, because I'm interested in computational design and I want to relate these data based in construction to such interesting visualizations. Yeah, because this is it.
Okay, so yes, okay, so what we could also do is to because basically often working with archival data is one way to say, okay, we're going to shrink time. So that might be one thing that we could look at tomorrow, because it's true that real-time data is often not as exciting as what it seems like. Usually, like when you're developing a project, there's multiple stages. Step one is, what is the data, the cleanup. The second part is like, what is the visualization method you want to use. The third part is, if it's real time, what is novel about the real time aspect, right? Because sometimes it's being real time is exciting, but if real time means once a day, which is still real time, depending on the data source, it's not gonna attract people's attention, right? So that could be an interesting experiment for scientists, but the audience of the interaction, if it's the general public, they will not wait one day to see the information changing, right? So scale of time is quite important when we're talking about data visualization. So one way to overcome that is if we're working with random data. So this is quite, you mentioned Grasshopper, it's quite common where you say, I don't know what the accurate information is, I'm just going to set up the algorithm right now, right? So these could be separate steps. So step one could be visualize something, and then that something could be maybe approached as an open-ended component. So one thing we can look at is to look at time scale that's maybe shrinking. So maybe this is something that we can control with a slider. So then this way one is able to speed up or kind of slow down the process, right? So often basically the visualization itself is one thing, but the data itself is another thing. So another thing that we're going to talk about tomorrow, and I'll have a presentation for that, is about the entertainment aspect of information visualization. So I'll talk about that more tomorrow, because often when we're thinking about Unity and game engine, we're talking about how do you keep people engaged, right? So then keeping people engaged, it has certain mechanics that we can learn from in game engines. But that gives me an idea of perhaps what is it that you might be expecting, so then it helped me kind of adjust the examples for tomorrow. Thanks. Any other thoughts, or because the reality is that, like, whether you're working with you know, grasshopper lists, or whether you're using processing or Unity, there's the data structure itself is kind of universal, right? So these are the main types that NJ has mentioned. So you're still dealing with the same types, the same structures. What becomes tricky is kind of using or misusing a platform for that. And in Unity by default is not aimed to do information visualization, right? It's not kind of what by default, you know, it doesn't have game objects that are by default set up for this. So it's a little bit of a stretch to do that, but then that's where the excitement and the possibility is. Yeah, so so we really want to use the next hour as just more of a working session for you. So just feel free to open the examples, go over them, and we can just make sure that everybody's on the same page, so then we can start fresh for tomorrow.
I have a specific question in the number 5 data passage and the 6 importing package. Where you input a bitmap, the height bitmap.
Okay, so
yeah. So my question is, the bitmap scale, is it the bitmap scale need to rescale?
let me open the file. So you are in the 5 data, right?
Yeah, 5 data.
Input image, input image, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Importing.
Yeah. Which line are you looking at right now?
Line 21. Like, is
Wow.
that?
Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
So in this line, is that like remap function? Because the image here, is it need to rescale through a function?
Yeah, I think to be honest, I didn't focusing on what the important import the required parameter. But I guess just from my experience, this is more about like a ratio, I guess, because as you can see here, we scroll down a little bit. Oh yeah, so line 32, in any case, we rebuild the size again. Number 33, and X is I, 35, Z is Z. So I mean, the ratio is not that important in this case because anyhow, we want to populate the sphere, right? In this case, the size is gonna be generated in that vector rather than the image. Images, I think, it doesn't matter. Yeah, like a 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, it's okay, I guess. Yeah.
So what if I put in another image? Should I need to change here if it's not 1 by 1?
I didn't test it, but let me quickly take a look at the documentation. Yeah. Potentially, there could have some parameter to define the the width and height or ratio, things like that. Okay, so yeah, according to the, I can share this screen. Yeah. Let me share my screen. This is a good question. So yeah, you can search it. So this is the documentation for Unity, right? And then there's a lot of things, and you can search here whatever error. But yeah, now you know the 2D text 2D constructor, and this is the how we use it. Yeah, this is public so that we can access the class, and then this is the parameter, like the integer. This is data type and width and height. So in this case, they said like the text will be width and height size RGBA 32-bit, blah blah blah. So in this case, we can think about like the size of the image. Yeah. If you have a different size or ratio, then you can put it. Yeah. This is my answer. But I think the reason I put 1 is in the what we want is to fetch the data out of the image, right? So in this case, the sizes doesn't matter because whenever you size when the bigger, I guess the color is basically interpolate. So in this case, I think the ratio is important so that we can just put starting with the 1, and then as the request is going, then we can play with the parameter. Yeah, we can do that, I guess. Is it helpful for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So so each time if I change the text type, sorry, texture, I need to change the value as well.
Yeah, I think you can do that.
And is that like you have a value called solution here? Solution
is it has nothing to do with this the constructor's variable. Yeah, solution is just like a you know, the image is sometimes image 500 pixel or like 1,000 pixel, like things like that, right? So human being is okay because high resolution is always high quality, right? But for the computer side, the high resolution sometimes is it takes a lot of time to loop all individual like pixels. But the color-wise, the color difference is not that strong. Just like a deep learning, for example, whenever you use the train image for the deep learning, no one uses like 1,000 or 100. They just stick to like a very the meaningful size of the image, like 100 or 80 pixel, things like that. So in this case, the resolution in that code base is you can actually, if you have a image, we have a called color value pixel by pixel, right? Pixel by pixel. But the image is, as you know, you can take your picture and then zoom in, and then you can all the way zoom in, see the individual pixel, and the pixel color is not that difference, right? So in this case, we can compress the pixel and the image into smaller pixel so that we can make us faster. And then also what we wanted to do is create the vector, right? Vector out of the image data, so that we can actually apply some spacing between vectors. In that area, we can also have a chance to resize the image, not that image resize, but more about like scaling of the entire terrain, for example. Yeah. This is more about like how we pre-process the data. Yeah. CSV JSON, sometimes the GeoJSON has its own data. Sometimes it has a lot of noise, or sometimes it has like different resolution. So I mean, even you ask me like real-time data, right? So real-time data is sometimes it gives us like a lot of data. So we need to pre-process every second. So maybe you can, in this case, you can make some middleman to negotiate the process. Yeah. So there are many ways. I mean, for the data visualization specialist, it's the most important aspect is not just making something beautiful, but more about like understanding the data and then create the pipeline. I think this is really important things. So for the image processing, image is pretty computational expensive operation. So in this case, we can apply some resolution or some import like a meaningful resolution rather than maintaining the original size, which is usually big. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, the good question to answer your question as a summary, you know, whenever you have questions, go to the documentation, because documentation is always, because we are not developer, right? So as long as the developers mention and open the API, we are able to use it. So that, and then you can, as a developer, I'm always wanted to stick to simplest way, as always, and then making resolve one issue and then add the other complexity and the other complexity. So you don't need to worry about like what if different size is coming. So maybe if the component is working correctly, and you can make the other pre-process to whatever images come to that moment, you pre-cooked the random size image into regular or, you know, some designate like format, for example. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is like how you develop your pipeline for the visualization. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Maybe one question that would help for tomorrow. How many of you are Mac users or PC users? Anybody using Mac or the Unity for Mac? No. Okay, the other thing is, how many of you have iOS phone versus Android? Maybe how many people have Android phones? 1, 2, 2 Android. Rest is iOS. Okay, thanks. For those of you with iOS phone, do you have access? Maybe you don't have Unity for Mac, but you have access to a Mac computer. All right, okay, thanks. That would help me for tomorrow. I have another question. Is anybody already working with environmental data in your group? I'm curious if anybody's already working with a specific database. We can take a look at that. No. All right. Is anybody interested in a certain type of data? So for instance, what we're going to look at tomorrow is the open weather. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. If you have any comments. If you're interested in a certain type of data. Yeah.
Is it possible to get data from a CCTV camera?
So that's different. Yes, actually, in our lab, we're currently doing this for robotics because we're not able to be, or we weren't able to be in the lab. The problem is when you're bringing in video data in Unity, the frame rate tends to drop quite a lot. But it's absolutely possible. What I could do is I could present like an overview of our methodology for that. Is there a specific way that you would want to use that? I'm curious.
Actually, I want to like use the movement data of some. Sure, cause I was thinking about there are some tracking in CCTV, something like that. So, or maybe I can get movement of cars from a website of Lyft or Uber. So is that possible? I just like it's massive movement data in city scale.
So there is an OpenCV library for Unity because basically these are like multiple different steps, right? So first is where is that data? And that data could be real time or it could be a video that you've captured, I don't know, from YouTube or yourself, right? So one is where is that video located? Is that something that's constantly being updated? So is it real time or is it static, right? So it could be either. So that has its own technical issues. And the other part is then how do you import the video and then how are you analyzing the information? Because movement information, it could come from also many other sources, right? So what about instead of tracking, doing a computer vision analysis, you're able to track GPS of the cars, right? Or what if you're using a Connect and instead of doing a recognition of people, you're actually looking at position of their joints, right? So there's many different ways that tracking can happen. So if you're looking at tracking of, in this case, like let's say connect information. So in this case, that those joints could be written as a CSV or as a JSON. And in this case, then the workflow that we shared with you, that should work, right? But if it's using image-based, so then you need to look at the OpenCV library for Unity. It's not, it's still very buggy. It's still not very, kind of the real-time component is still not very fleshed out. But it is possible. But as I said, the biggest issue becomes frame rates, right? Because imagine you're trying to, going back to the question of time and delta time, it's basically you're trying to match many different interactions at the same time. So what is kind of your zero moment? How are these aligning? How are you checking whether they're aligned or not? So there's that component. Yeah, it is possible though.
Okay, thank you.
So let me share that. Let's see. Yeah, you can get the OpenCV library from the asset stores. It's not free. That's another thing. For instance, for importing data, there's already a number of packages that you can download from Unity asset store. But then these are kind of people that have written their own, obviously, custom packages. For that, what becomes really tricky is then, are you willing to pay for it? Are you willing to work with the version that they are specifying? Because sometimes, these developers might not keep up with the versions, right? So then this is how you end up with like 10 different Unity versions, because you're using one library from here, one library from there. So the idea was to just kind of show you how do you just look at this in a very basic kind of way. Otherwise, once you start to get into packages, then there's more version dependencies, etc. I was wondering if there's, Charlotte, you said that you had your hand up. Like, is there a specific data that you were interested in, data type? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
Please.
I'm curious about normally the data we can get a lot of data is from human, is from city, but is it only possible we can get some data from like landscape, plants, or trees like this? I'm just curious about this. Yeah.
So what do you mean by that? Like trace it, or like doing some kind of a computer vision edge detection, trace it? I guess I'm not clear. Yeah.
Like my question is, we always can get the data from human-made facility, something like this, or from the city. But if any possible, we can get the data from the plants, from the nature.
Yeah, so there's different ways you can go about this. One is, so it's very common to do LiDAR scanning and import the point clouds. So importing point clouds in Unity is actually could happen in similar way that what NJ was showing. So basically you either have coordinates or you use an image. So the image example is really important because that's ultimately how in remote sensing, is everybody familiar with what remote sensing is? So remote sensing is the science of using satellite images to capture the land, right? So that's how basically like NASA has series of satellites. One of them is called SRTM. So it goes around and constantly captures the group, right? So there is a database by USGS that, for instance, this geotiffs are being updated. So you could, just think about grabbing the TIFF, importing, and then getting, let's say, height map, right? Which is pretty much like what the how a lot of programs, for instance, even Unity has a terrain function. And with terrain function, you could create a topo, right? So you can just say, this is the city, give me the topo. So, but ultimately, the science behind using satellite images to create land would be exactly what NJ demonstrated with the height map with the color difference, right? Because then basically what becomes more sophisticated is the fact that you say, in the satellite, I have this many bands, this many colors. So then what is kind of height associated with that? So there's that. And NJ working at Esri, he could talk about that more. But basically, like combination of GIS, either raster or vector, in combination with remote sensing is where you could do kind of land detection. But basically, this field that you're mentioning is the spatial computing as a field in general. Although spatial computing right now, people are talking about AR and VR, but it's kind of understanding of the environment with the use of sensors, right? So in this case, whether the sensors are in the lab, what Yuvan was saying, can you use a camera to detect movement, or whether the sensors are placed in your backyard just to see if somebody walks through, or whether it's used as a satellite image to capture the land. When it comes to extraction, you're using a couple of different strategies, right? So strategy one is, can I identify a boundary, and then that boundary is then turning to either, through edge detection, it turns to vector information. Can I use a raster, and then I'm able to do depth detection, and that information could then change to 3D. Can I use a specific position, either using GPS, or if this is an information that I can extract, and that information can be imported as point. And that's what, let's say, what also LiDAR information is doing as well, right? So it's taking images and turning into a point. So when you really kind of simplify what information, how information exchanges change and how that turns to visualization, it really comes down to the types that was presented today. NJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree what you said. I mean, there's no like particular additional comments. You already elaborate in a good way. So.
Maybe, Charlotte, you were talking about the construction side information. How do you kind of envision this? How do you think that could be different or similar? Maybe we can discuss that, and then that would help in the examples tomorrow. So is this more about kind of use of augmented reality with overlaying of, I don't know, like pipes or object detection? So if you elaborate on that, it would help us with the examples.
The type of data I'm getting to is some unstructured data from everywhere about the infrastructural projects within a city. So first, I'm going to organize such data, extract some valuable information, and then we're gonna design an interface, kind of website, for example, for showing those valuable data to the customers to get some valuable information. So the more attractive the way we visualize such data, so the more efficient the project will be. Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of things. I wonder if we could like kind of identify them a little bit earlier. You said we're going to collect all kinds of data. So what does that mean? Can you give us like more of a specific scenario? Are these more of kind of positions? Like usually like when you have a site, you set up like similar to the Rhino environment, right, or the Revit environment. You set up an origin because otherwise like nothing would align. So with this, is this kind of more about Euclidean position in space? Is it about geotagging the parts? Is it about a visual positioning system, so VPS instead of GPS? So visual positioning system, which is what kind of GPS is going to turn into, is going to completely change the way that we're thinking about image and also coordinate system information. So this is going to be revolutionary when we're thinking about VPS instead of GPS. But so maybe like if you give an example, then we can kind of track and think about kind of the fundamental aspect of it, and then just think about how like I could do a demo of that in the example.
Okay, it's at the very first steps, but what is in my head is to, okay, we have the location of the private sector construction or the public sector, whatever. So we have, of course, locations and some points within the city. So each project owns the economical information, force or it's so helpful to give valuable information in a glance once a customer open this interface and when I look at what's going on in different projects and actually he or she can validate
close your camera
or can do some campaign.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, the customer also can do some comparison on that stage, what she or he's going to do and what was the data of the previous constructed projects. So yeah, this is about the GPS data and some extra data about each project propagated through the city everywhere.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So all right, so I'll try to incorporate a GPS example. But I think just the reason that I'm asking is because I really want to, maybe one thing would be obviously like you're right now in the stage of conceptualization, but if you really think about, you're saying when we think about data and information, it's really important to try our best to kind of really think about it as a, and I'll talk about this more tomorrow, there's this thing called user stories where you're able to kind of strip back and really understand who's the audience without really knowing the audience and their background information. It becomes quite difficult because right now what you're saying is they open and look at an information. Are they looking at image information? Are they looking at, are they looking at a 3D asset that's independent of site? So it is in a very kind of a basic way what also Andre was mentioning, the fundamental of it, it goes back to these couple of scenarios, right? That it's either static and it's presented as CSV, it's either static and you take that CSV or you convert it or you're working with a JSON. It's either dynamic and you're using, let's say you're querying it from a server, so you're using web access. So when it comes down to the basics, right, there's only like a few things that you're dealing with. And by having, let's say, the example that allows me to, okay, I'm trying to do this plus that equals that, right? And as NJ mentioned, you don't ever, like, nobody sits down and writes everything from scratch. It's all about kind of understanding how these components would work, interact with one another, and then ultimately what is then relationship of the data part to visualization. So I think that could be quite interesting. So we'll talk about this more tomorrow with examples, but it's really interesting because let's say if you look at NJ's work, it's as sophisticated as it gets with the stories maps that he's creating, is working on, and when it comes down to like thinking about the data, it's quite actually black and white, right? Because you realize that a lot of the time you spend on cleaning the information, retrofitting the information. So on one hand, it could look, quite abstract and ephemeral, but at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to like kind of very systematic steps. But maybe that's the fascinating part of this, right? Because let's say this idea of information visualization that could be immersive, the idea of environmental information visualization that could be immersive, this idea of real-time versus archival information visualization. There's so many aspects, right? And then why are architects the people that are curious in this along other ones? I think that's an interesting conversation to have. So we have another 20 minutes left. If you want to hang around, look at the examples, feel free to do that. Otherwise, if you wish to, if you're okay with the examples, you could also, be free to leave, and we can resume tomorrow at the same time. Okay, so this is found something about traffic. Let's take a look at it. So traffic flow tile. Traffic flow. So are you interested in, let's say, satellite? So in the sense, the way that you in Google Maps, you import the, you say like go from point A to point B, and then it gives you the traffic flow. Are you interested in that?
No. I mean, to get these cars running in an area, all cars, many cars. So that's a massive data. So it's not about navigation, just the movement. Like the Google Map will tell you this, there is a traffic jam, like that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this. So it seems like it gives you a series of transparent tiles.
Not sure how to access that, but I guess the data will show like a series of vector, something like that, maybe.
I don't think this is vector based from what it seems. If you look at the format, click on tile format. So there's vector graphics in the PDF formats. In the PNG format. So yeah, it seems like it has both vector and raster. It seems like there is a pricing for this.
I'm trying to register and count for that.
Yeah, it seems like there's 2 pricing tier that would allow you to get access. There's free account, but it might not give you.
Oh, the format. The desired format for response possible values are PNG and PDF. That's weird.
No, it's a PDF. So it's.
I don't think that's something.
So so basically, this is similar to when you're using, when you zoom, but then you still have your raster tiles. So it's using combination of the two.
Maybe I look into it later, because when I search on internet, the most answers says the raw data is not accessible from Google Map. So need to do it something like this. Azure Maps.
So maybe, maybe if you like, what is specifically, like what type of data type would be your interest? And we can look into like finding other data sources for this. Is it about kind of just being able to map flow of cars, people, or is it more about the data type?
I guess it's more about the location of these cars in a region. So like you get a series of location. I expect it should be a real-time data. Like you can know how fast they're moving and where they're at.
Okay, I'll see if I can find or put together an example of real-time camera-based input, because as I said, like it could be many different components, but let's say like if we go to the example of you have a security camera and it's streaming, so there is a couple of different steps. I'll see if I could get into like making it, but if not, I can definitely guide you to the right place. Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's just it has kind of a couple of different steps. Yeah, so real time is definitely it's an interesting concept. How real time is real time.
Yeah, because when like if it's just static, you can just take a screenshot from the map and or retrieve some data and do some visualization. But I think for real time must be very interesting because it's totally
what you
unexpected.
said with like take a screenshot, but then how does that screenshot translate to? Is it like a centroid position of a thing? Is it on the edge? Is it so in a sense like these are different steps, right? You could have the screenshot or image that you're querying, but what does that translate to, right? So the example that NJ showed, where you have a field of points that is generated from the image, right? So that's already like half of the workflow, right? So that's already, there is an image, and then information of that image is translated to geometry color. Now, then in this case, then the first part of the workflow is where is that information, where is that image coming from, and can you update it every so often, right? With in this case, it could be video, it could be frames. So often, for instance, if you look at a satellite image, there is no video, right? And satellite images is just images that are being updated, right? Or images that are just being added to an archive, and you're just deciding, I want to get the latest, I want to get the oldest, so whatever that might be, right? So in a sense, we're talking about real time of, in a sense, there's a couple of things. One is kind of the capability to update, right? So capability to update is for that system is completely independent of what is the archives updating rate, right? So going back to the REST API example that Indre presented today, that part is independent from how OpenWeather is updating its information, right? Because the capability is there. It's just that part is independent. So now you could alternative to OpenWeather, you can set up your own weather station and you can say, actually, this is not fast enough. So that's partially what we've done in a couple of cities where we said weather station is not accurate, it's not high resolution. Can you replace that part with my own sensors or my own whatever or another source, right? But the capability is there, right? So that's kind of, it's up to you. So you're in a car that you started and it's up to it, for the car, if it's moving, it doesn't really matter whether you're going 5 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour because the capability is there. So it's quite similar kind of way of thinking about real-time information type, and yeah.
And I have one sort of comment on it. I mean, my definition of data visualization is more about like converting numeric things to the visual things. Because computer is absolutely good at calculating something. Even if you use the string or some character, you actually consider as a number in the computer side on the low level. And yeah, I mean, every data could be as a number. So, but human being is good at number, but the human being is a more visual animal. So we need to see some particular visual language. Otherwise, it's hard to process compared to the computer, right? So my definition is more about like converting and representing number as a visual thing. So in that context, again, as long as we are able to convert the phenomena in our environment and into number that could be processed by computer, which is okay. And observe something and then calculate and counting. You can take a picture. You can use the LiDAR, whatever sensing. Basically, they are actually converting some phenomena or some something into numeric things that could be calculated. I mean, even for the real-time data set, I guess it's what does it mean by real-time? I mean, there are multiple definitions. Like real-time means like you can update in more than 60 frames or 30 frames, and interactive is like a 10 frame or whatever. Then people can consider, oh, this is interactive things. My definition is the real-time data visualization more about like reflecting the time sequences, and then as you mentioned, like speed of the car, things like that. Something that we can sense some just image, but also from sort of a video format. Like it has the other dimension, which is representing time dimension, right? What about like some graphical representation, 2D or graphical representation with a 3D, which is a time frame, yeah, because human being again could add like expecting some insight from these kind of visual things. Sometimes image, sometimes video. Video is, as I said, like real-time graphics, real-time data visualization. We can consider as a video, right? Because it has the time sequences. So I think we can think about this kind of pipeline as a developer, just like because we need to create the as I mentioned, like data visualization is something really beautiful. It's more about like think about the pipeline, more about like how we're dealing with the complex unstructured data into very compressed lightweight data structure, because again, it's more about like nurturing baby to the adult, you know, because we have a like plan to, okay, I'm gonna, you know, making or students or planies to doctor, whatever thing. I mean, you need to make a plan to see. So I think you need to convert, just make a simple stuff to, you can make a simple, finding simple, and then isolate the problem individual box so that we can make a more scalable things, and then we can apply the just inject the real-time data pipeline to that your pipeline to visualizing something. I mean, we can make a discretized process to set up, think about the data visualization beyond like, is it static or real time or immediate writing or data? More about like, rather than, well, I mean, obviously we need to think about this kind of topic, but from my experience is we can starting like think about pipeline. What does it mean by visualization for you or for your project? Like, yeah, maybe I mean I'm too.
Thanks for this informative feedbacks. Because for me personally, I think it's all about the goals. Because now data is so easy to get. I mean, whether it's GPS or local data from a camera, but always about final destination, the target. So you mentioned the pipeline. I guess it's also related. Like what's the ultimate goal you want? How you want to utilize this data?
So I mean, when I say pipelines, it's about like process or methodology. Where I mean, even we design some building or district in urban context, we have our own strategy, like on process, how to make a steps. Like sometimes we can do some iterative process, and then we can make the other like a linear sort of a procedure. So yeah, I mean, as a developer, and as an engineer or a designer at the same time, I have not only my work, but also I have my project, personal client and designers and many people. I mean, so while I'm working and interacting with other different sort of, let's say, client, then I'm always thinking like, what is like a best strategy, you know, sort of, meet their expectation. And then I realized like there is some common pattern, yeah, that we can make as a some of module or pipeline. I mean, I emphasize this kind of things maybe a little bit, so that's why talk like pipeline is important. Yeah, I mean, it's different sort of description of one monolith-like process or goal, you know. But people, I mean, for data visualization, people has a different sort of goal or purpose, right? So I'm an engineer, so I need to make some pipeline or like a playground or product or app. And some other people, they have a particular project they need to build to resolve this design process rather than make it generic or common things. So yeah, I mean, which is very interesting things, I guess. The data visualization, particularly using real-time data, I guess.
All right. We're gonna just so we just ask you to just take a look at the examples for tomorrow. So in a sense, you know, you're ready to go, and there's quite a lot of there's quite a lot of things that we went over in discussion and technically today. So we're gonna try our best to wrap it up in a way tomorrow that also it reflects your interest. And again, like the idea for this workshop is to just try to create a fundamental framework and these conversations. And the idea is that we're setting up a little community, and hopefully, you know, you could use this to continue reaching out to us or whatever that might be doing. It's just the format of the workshop. I mean, because of the time, it's quite limiting. So we just wanted to make sure that we're covering some fundamentals, but also some basic conversations. Yeah, so again, if you could take a look at the example, especially the data folder, that would set us up for tomorrow. And we'll start at 9 a.m. Eastern time sharp to then build an example together. Right, so if you have questions rest of the day, feel free to ask it on Discord, and that's about it. Okay, so we're just gonna end today, and I'll post the video on chat, so for whoever wants to catch up, and then see everyone tomorrow. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye.